The evening sun bled across the plains, sinking low behind the jagged teeth of the western hills. The sky was fire and ash, a fading canvas of red and gold, while the prairie grass whispered in the restless wind. Dust clung to the air, stirred by the hoofbeats of a lone rancher riding home after a long day. His name was Elias Boone, a man known across 2 counties as hard as the land itself. His hat-brimmed, shadowed eyes carved by storms, his hands scarred by years of rope and branding irons. He carried silence like a weapon, and most folks knew better than to speak too close unless spoken to. But this night would not pass in silence. As Elias guided his weary horse down the wagon trail, he spotted something ahead, a figure stumbling in the dirt. At first, he thought a coyote dragging itself from a trap, but then, as he drew nearer, the shape collapsed to its knees. A woman. Her dress was torn, caked with dust, clinging to her frame like a shroud. Her hair, once golden, now hung wild and tangled, hiding most of her face. She lifted her head just enough for him to see eyes swollen red from tears. And then, with a voice cracked from thirst and despair, she cried, "Please, I'm begging you." The words ripped through the wind, cutting deep into the rancher's chest. His horse pawed the dirt, uneasy at the sound, but Elias sat frozen in the saddle, staring down at her. She pressed her hands against the ground, clutching the soil as if it could save her, then crawled closer until her fingers brushed the toe of his boot. The desperation in her voice broke like glass. "Don't leave me here. Don't ride past like the others. Please, I have nowhere else to go." Elias's jaw clenched. He had seen his share of desperate folk before, runaways, drifters, outlaws wearing a mask of innocence. The West was full of stories that ended in betrayal, and he had learned the hard way that pity could be fatal. But something about this woman's trembling voice, something raw and ragged in the way she collapsed against his boots, tore at him. "Stand up," he muttered, his voice rough from disuse. She shook her head violently. "I can't. Not until you promise. Just don't leave me. Don't let them find me." Them. The word tightened Elias's grip on the reins. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing. The land was wide open, empty but never truly safe. Whoever she meant could be near, and if they were, she brought trouble straight to him. "Who's after you?" His voice was sharp now, edged like a drawn blade. Her body shook, shoulders rising and falling with heavy sobs. She buried her face in her dirt-stained hands, whispering words too broken for him to catch. All he could make out was, "They'll kill me." Elias felt the air change, as if the prairie itself was holding its breath. He slid from the saddle, his boots striking hard earth. The woman flinched at the sound, shrinking back, but he reached down and caught her arm. "Enough," he said, rough but steady. "You're not dying here in the dirt." With a single pull, he lifted her up, light as a feather in his grip. And then he froze. Her face turned toward the setting sun, the hair falling back from her eyes. For the first time, he saw her clearly. The world seemed to stop, the wind, the sound of his horse, even the ache of his own breath. Elias Boone, a man carved out of stone, stood rooted to the ground, stunned by the sight before him. Elias Boone's hand, rough from years of rope and reins, stiffened around her arm. The prairie wind pressed against him, carrying the dry rattle of grass and the lonely cry of a hawk overhead. Yet he heard nothing, saw nothing, but her face, her eyes. Lord help him. They were the same shade of storm gray as another pair he'd once known, eyes that haunted his sleep for 10 long years, eyes he had sworn were gone forever. For a moment his throat locked, his jaw went slack, and the woman must have felt his grip falter, because she looked at him in confusion. "Dubby, what is it?" she whispered, wiping strands of hair from her face. Elias stepped back, his boots crunching against the dirt. His breath was shallow, uneven. "That ain't possible," he muttered, more to himself than to her. She searched his face, as if terrified he'd cast her aside, and then, desperate to anchor herself, she clutched at his coat sleeve. "Please don't let go. I've lost everyone, everything. I can't lose this chance too." But Elias wasn't hearing her words. He was hearing echoes. The memory of a cabin fire, screams swallowed by night, his sister's voice, cry his name before the flames took her. He had buried her in his heart, convinced she was gone. Yet here before him stood the same face, aged by pain but alive. Sarah. His voice cracked like dry timber. The woman froze, her lips parting in shock. What did you call me? His hands trembled as he caught her shoulders. Sarah Boone. My sister. She stared at him as though staring at a ghost. For a long, heavy silence, the earth itself seemed to tilt. Then, slowly, tears welled in her eyes. I thought you were dead. Elias's heart slammed against his chest. No, I thought you were. And then it all broke loose. The sob that escaped her was raw, shuddering. She collapsed into his arms, clinging to him as though afraid he'd vanish. Elias, the man who hadn't shed a tear since burying his father, held her tight, his jaw pressed to her hair, his shoulders shaking. But just as quickly as relief washed over him, a shadow crossed the sun. Hoofbeats, distant at first, then nearer. Elias stiffened, his arms tightening around her. Who's following you, Sarah? She pulled back, terror flashing in her eyes. Men, hired riders. They work for the Baron. He said I belonged to him. When I ran, he swore he'd drag me back, dead or alive. Elias cursed under his breath. The Baron, cattle-rich, merciless, a man who crushed anyone in debt to him. Elias had crossed paths with his riders before, and he knew the kind of cruelty they carried. The hoofbeats grew louder, like thunder rolling over the hills. Elias grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward his horse. Up, he ordered. But no time. Up. He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind her, the leather groaning under their weight. With a sharp kick, the horse surged forward just as three riders appeared on the ridge, rifles glinting in the fading light. Boone, one shouted. Hand her over, and maybe we'll let you crawl home alive. Elias bent low over his sister, shielding her with his body. Hold on. The horse thundered across the open prairie, dirt flying beneath pounding hooves. Bullets split the air, whistling past. One struck a rock, shattering it into sparks. Sarah cried out, clutching his arm, but Elias never slowed. He angled toward the canyon, where the land broke into shadowed cliffs and winding gullies. It was the only chance. They could lose the riders in a maze of stone. Behind them, curses rang out, followed by the relentless drumming of pursuit. Elias guided the horse into the canyon mouth, the walls rising high and narrow. Dust choked the air. Shadows deepened. Sarah turned, her voice shaking. Elias, I thought I'd never see you again. He gritted his teeth, eyes sharp on the winding trail. We'll have time for words once we shake these devils. But inside, his heart roared louder than the hoofbeats. She was alive. Against all odds, the blood he thought lost was here, breathing, holding on to him. They plunged deeper into the canyon, bullets chasing, but never finding. The riders shouted, splitting paths to cut them off. Elias steered toward a hidden pass, one he remembered from cattle drives long ago. As the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Elias Boone and the sister he thought dead vanished into the wilderness, leaving only dust and echoes behind.